Can you please tell us a bit about yourself and your school, the context that you're in, and what motivated you to become a leader for marriage, family, and sexual integrity on your campus?
Well, Eduardo Andino from Yale University. Thanks so much for everyone who wants to listen to us speak. So just to, I guess, a little about myself and my involvement with this sort of thing at Yale. Me and my suite mate, Bijan, started undergraduates for a better Yale College last summer, sort of in anticipation of Yale's 2012 Sex Week. 2010, of course, had been sort of the culmination of a gradual process with every Sex Week of sort of just getting worse and worse every year. You know, by 2010, there's just lots of crazy stuff, sort of oral sex workshops going on in Yale classrooms, sex toy exhibitions, student, lingerie fashion shows, and just lots of weird, crazy stuff. If anyone's looked at Nathan Hardin's Sex and God at Yale, he outlines, of course, Madison Young, a porn actress, and her sort of bondage and sadomasochism display that she brought. And so we kind of felt that if 2012 was just going to continue this trend, we should sort of, do something and try to make things better. So we essentially had a two-prong approach. Our first was really sort of a media campaign. We sort of attacked through the Yale Daily News with opinion pieces and advertisements and this sort of thing, and just kind of tried to get the conversation going on campus, saying, hey, this is actually really bad. We can't just pretend this is normal stuff. And we put a petition campaign in which we actually tried to get the school to ban Sex Week, not allow those sorts of activities to go on in Yale classrooms if they were going to continue to be of that quality. That was weird because it sort of it seemed like it was going to work for a while. Once the news was gathering of the petitions and everything, the president of Yale, at the advice of a Marshall committee which he put together to advise him on the sexual climate at Yale, was considering banning Sex Week, and at first sort of decided in a sort of ambiguous statement that because it was sponsored by corporate, companies, that those wouldn't be allowed, but that, something would be allowed to happen. So it was sort of a confused response. I should give a little bit of the context here. Yale experienced quite a lot of other stuff regarding sexual culture with the Title IX complaints, which came a few years back when one of the fraternities started parading through campus on one of their induction nights, shouting, no means yes, yes means anal. And they shouted this in front of the Women's Center. And of course, they got in trouble for that. And later, a Title IX complaint was filed against the university, claiming that in cases of rape, the university doesn't really do a good job of addressing them. They sort of try to, hide these cases or sweep them under the carpet, as the saying goes. That was a claim. I don't claim to know much about that element of the situation. But in any case, this was sort of the context in which these things were coming up. And our approach was really to say, hey, look, we're seeing all this crazy stuff, just blatant disrespect for, a civil community, rape, lots of uncomfortable situations, widespread drunkenness, next morning regrets. It doesn't take a Yale student to realize that there's something wrong with the sexual culture here, and so we as undergraduates for better Yale College are going to address this and say, it's because of the way we look at sexuality. It's the kind of values we promote through things like Sex Week. We need to start getting a more sane vision of how we treat sexuality if we're going to be a community of respect and sort of scholars and students living together. So that was sort of our big effort on Yale campus.
Hi, I'm Luciana. I'm a junior at Harvard, and I came to Harvard not knowing what it meant when people said Harvard is liberal. But first week of school was enough to understand. And I went to this Republican Club meeting that, full disclosure, I'm pretty open about that. And I met this girl who was talking about this group that she led called the True Love Revolution. And she talked about it and said she led this like chastity group, and I was like, that's so weird. Why do we need a chastity group why do you need like a group? I didn't get it, and thought it was silly. But this girl became my friend, and she invited me to the meeting, she invited me to the conference, and within a short amount of time, I realized the need for the message that was behind this group. The True Love Revolution was founded in 2006, originally as promoting chastity, but expanded its mission to include traditional marriage and true femininity. And at Harvard, all of these things are super controversial. And I really like to debate, so I was like, okay, I can handle it. I can talk to people about this kind of stuff. But didn't really know, that I would have to talk to 99.9% of the people. Or I don't really know how many people disagree with me, but that it was a much more feisty audience than I anticipated. And I came to the conference, but then started to realize that what they wanted to talk about was completely contrary to what we stood for, and similar to some of the things that that Yale promoted in their Sex Week. The Harvard Sex Week had this large misunderstanding of what health education or sex-related issues, like what's healthy and what's good. And so it was really funny, and I like to bring up the story just to highlight how skewed their understanding of our message is that I was sitting down with the organizers, and they said, well, we have 2 events you'd be interested in. One is on asexuality, and if you're interested, if you're interested in co-sponsoring, like, we think this would be a great event for you. So I sat there and said, you think we're asexual? So, I mean, that's one. And the other one was like about the hookup culture, but some of the people that they think we would have interest in were like from Planned Parenthood and like talking on abstinence. I'm like, yeah, I don't really think that we align on that message. So we decided to take a stance against Sex Week, not participate, and just see what kind of fools they made of themselves. And we're still working to provide our message on campus and try to be loud and try to write articles and host events. But we're still in the works of rethinking how we're going to really fight this overwhelming majority of different opinions.
My name is Chris Mooney. As was mentioned, I am a senior at Georgetown. I can't partake in the historic Yale-Harvard rivalry, but our Jesuits will gladly debate the preeminence of our university any day. So I became involved with the group that we have, or the earlier version of the group that we had my freshman year of high school. I did not, found the group. It was actually passed on by a previous student who has graduated a while ago to another student here tonight, Kieran Raval. Kieran had worked, I think, with other students to bring Dr. Fagan to give a lecture. And I went to that. I was curious. It was actually another student group on campus called the Tocqueville Forum, and co-sponsored the event. I heard about it through them and came there. I'll just make a quick note. I've become much more involved since then, and since I know that religion is all, faith is all very important for a lot of people here, and I'm sure that many leaders here struggle with getting non-religious people to count. I came as a non-Christian. I was sort of interested, and I ended up being very, very intrigued by what the group was doing anyway. So, just as an encouragement there, but. So I joined with Kieran and another student, and we worked over the next few years, just the 3 of us, to just start bringing good speakers to campus. We didn't have the kind of strength or numbers to be able to really fight back against anything else. And thankfully, too, Georgetown hasn't had recently anything like Sex Week, but we did work on bringing in a number of speakers. So we had Dr. Fagan that one year. The following year, we also brought in Helen Alvarez and Dawn Eden. And then this past fall, we brought Dr. Brad Wilcox. And that was mostly our strategy while we were there, is to work on these individual speakers. And our perspective was that by bringing each of them in, just to have the opportunity for that message to be present on campus, for people to be able to come and hear it by having the best speakers that we possibly could. So my involvement was originally just by being intrigued in the arguments that were being made, questioning what I thought was a very harmful and deleterious predominant culture on campus, and wanting to learn more about it. So I hope that's an encouragement to everyone in your own efforts to reach out to people who do not agree with you.
Before I go to the second question, I just mentioned something that came to my mind as they were speaking. You might think, what's the use of these societies? They come, they go, they blossom for a bit, they're hard to carry on. How do you do it? Do you want to get involved? Remember that at campuses like this one, revolutionary campuses, they had societies that might have flourished for 1 or 2 years. If you look at the memberships of these early societies, the point is that they existed and brought together a group of people for a particular amount of time. Now, we'd hope for longevity. You try to pass it on, you try to create the structures to be able to do it. But never think that when you create something and it doesn't work out the way that you think, or you leave and then it seems to fizzle out. You help the people who were there right at the time, and you never know which direction those students, those whom you served, will go in. So if you, again, historically, look at membership lists of clubs going back to the founding of the country, you'll see that many of the founders of the nation belonged to these little clubs. If they'd gone to university, they went out of existence. But it gave them a chance, a forum to speak, to develop ideas. So you can do that, and don't think that it's a wasted effort. Second question. This overlaps a bit with the first, so take it in the direction that you think would serve you best. Each of you has taken great strides in bringing the message of love and fidelity to your campuses. Can you share with us some of the work you've done, or any efforts you are particularly proud of?
So I mentioned at first how we kind of had our campaign to oppose Yale Sex Week and to try to get it done with. That didn't succeed, even though I think it was a success in terms of how many people really started to consider the issue and think about it and debate on it, especially in the Yale Daily News, national attention and everything. But I think our more, if you want to call it our more positive effort, I suppose, was to put on our own week, which we called True Love Week, sort of, to contrast emphases, I suppose. In Yale Sex Week, it was sort of simply sex, without anything else that really goes into it to make it beautiful and wonderful. And we sort of tried to emphasize the context. So, everything that we talk about here, marriage, fidelity, the possibility of procreation, and the openness to a more self-sacrificial notion of love, one that's less, simply, what am I getting out of this? And so we hosted a series of speakers for 6 or 7 days, many names that have been mentioned or passed through here: Chris Tollefson, Anthony Esselin, Brad Wilcox, etc. And I think in this case as well, we had some struggles getting people to show up to the events. I think our attendance might have been somewhere from 15 to 20 for most of them. So in that regard, it was sort of, I don't know if we had to have done a better job advertising or presenting it as something that people would want to go to. I think our success in that regard again was creating an opposition to Sex Week. Both weeks got about equal media attention in the Yale Daily News and in some national media outlets as well. And I think even just the fact of people hearing, there is something, trying to present a different view and an outlook, was definitely our biggest success. In one of the Yale newspapers, there was the Friday review was the battle of the sex weeks, and there were 2 cupids, one with a Sex Week banner and one with a True Love Week banner, fighting over a big heart in the middle that said Yale on it. And I think the heart was breaking too, which I think was appropriate for that situation. But yeah, I think really the fact that people really got interested was I'd say our big success. Definitely different student magazines all wanted a piece of the controversy, and so there were lots of interviews in which you really got to flesh out your ideas at length and really talk to people, both one-on-one with the people who would ask you about it, and put the ideas out there in magazines that students and others read. So that was key.
I think that one of the things that I'm really proud of is being able to rebuild a group when there's a group of people that graduate and having to start over. It's really hard because you don't really know what you want to focus on. You don't really have a full picture of the history of the group, and being able to piece everything try to piece everything together and start from scratch was something that I had to do, and was really humbling, but also paid off in so many ways, because having to put in a lot of time in meeting with different people and reaching out to a million different groups, and have no people reply to your emails, or people don't want to meet with you, or they're like, I had sent emails to every single chaplaincy, and I got an email that was the response was, "I cannot in my good nature endorse any of your views." And it was just this really terrible email, and I had to say, okay, well, I tried. So you win some and you lose some, but I think we've gained a lot of ground, especially building relationships with our professors, and that's something I'm really proud of and really happy that we've done, is that our professors know what's going on, they know our names, they know our struggles, and they are fighting the battle behind the scenes for us, and giving us advice on what to do. Another thing that I think that True Love Revolution and other student groups can really understand is that as a dissenting view, you're often attacked. But I think we've all done a good job of responding to those attacks well. So last year, the Love and Fidelity Network put together a poster campaign that was kind of controversial. It was just promoting chastity. And there were these two girls at Harvard who wrote this article in the Crimson about how our group was sexist because we used a statistic that had to do with women, and they just went on and said how we don't really debate fairly, and it was just really personal attack on our group. And so I responded, and I said, I responded to the article, kind of debunking their claims, and then invited them to an event that we were hosting that week. And I had warned and talked to Dr. Jennifer Robeck-Morse, who was giving a talk on smart sex, and I said, there's a chance that these girls will come and talk, or come to the event. And they came, and they had this awesome exchange with her. And for the people in the crowd to see that, these two lesbian girls just go at it with Dr. Morse, and her giving this very genuine and awesome response was something that I think is what is missing in the university, is a genuine dialogue, and having people really challenge us, and us having a really good response. So I think that's one of the successes that True Love Revolution has had in the past, and that we've been able to continue.
I think at Georgetown, the group that we've had, probably our best success has been the those 4 main lectures that I hosted that we mentioned. The first one we had with Dr. Fagan, I had, I believe, between maybe 30 and 50 people come. Our other two with Dawn Eden and Helen Alvarez had the same numbers, a little bit higher. And our last one with Dr. Wilcox had over 110 people come. Total shock to us. And I think we've really seen the strength that we're able to have there, and the impact that we're able to have, and the number of people that we're able to reach out to. Even if it doesn't cause a flurry on campus, if the newspaper doesn't pick it up, isn't really interested, doesn't care, and that's fine, because we still have lots of people come who we've never seen before. It's not the kind of event where me and my closest friends and one person we know who disagrees with our show. Dozens and dozens of people have come to these events over and over again who we've never seen before. And who we may never see again. But to be able to have that voice there to provide on campus, to provide that alternative view, especially with very intelligent, very articulate speakers, I think has been a tremendous strength for us at Georgetown. And in terms of, I think the best thing that we've been able to do in terms of advertising has just been to really reach out along all of the different venues that we could. And so that was a surprise for us and something that we really learned there, were all of the ways that we could reach out to people who we never would have known before. So even the most recent talk that we had with Dr. Wilcox, we put up flyers around campus. It was actually, it wasn't my idea, it was Kieran's idea. Again, very, very well put together flyers. They're very simple. We just had a, lovely romantic picture of sort of a couple swooning under an umbrella. And the title was, Wandering to the Altar, How to Successfully Date and Marry in America Today. And such a practical, that was actually Dr. Wilcox's idea, but such a practical title drew in just dozens of people there who were just looking for relationship advice. I mean, I was shocked to see people sitting there taking notes, listening to Dr. Wilcox when he was going through tip by tip by tip, as if they were reading an online dating guide, but they're getting it from Dr. Wilcox. So, being able to the way that you can stand up and intellectually defend your position is important, but being able to articulate your position in such a way that you can reach out to people on campus who are really curious and are genuinely looking for help in their own individual lives, I think is critical. And so just those images that I have in my mind of people sitting and listening to Dr. Wilcox and clearly taking notes. So the couple we saw in the back who when Dr. Wilcox made a distinction between dating and courtship, leaned into each other and the woman said to the guy, "Are we dating or are we courting?" But that's exactly what we want. Because debate though we may, what we want is for individual couples like that to think about what they're doing on campus. We want the two of them to sit down later and say, all right, what does it mean to do that? What's the difference between the two? Maybe actually there's one or two things that we had been doing before that we should not do anymore. Maybe there's one or two things that we hadn't been doing that Dr. Wilcox mentioned that we should do. That, I think, it would be real success on campus.
Excellent. So third question, greatest challenge that you faced, and how did you work to overcome it as you stood up and tried to be an active voice in support of love, marriage, and sexual integrity?
I think the greatest challenge is sort of just the human experience of all of this, is the fact that you undertake a project and you yourself aren't a finished product. You don't know everything that you think about a subject. You haven't fleshed everything out. So it's sort of it's easy to think you see an organization with an official banner and a logo, like they're set. It's a closed system for you science people out there. But that's not the case. You're still learning. You're making mistakes, you're growing day by day. So I think that's one of the greatest challenges, is really just learning where you actually are coming from, where others are coming from. You'll encounter sort of disappointments, betrayals. One of the challenging things for me is that my family is not exactly supportive of everything that I believe, and my dad probably wouldn't be thrilled to know that I'm here for a third year in a row at this conference, for example. So just learning really to talk to people. You don't just have it right away. I think you really develop your lines and everything over years, probably over a lifetime. Another big thing was on campus, just seeing who your allies are and who's ultimately on your side. There's groups that in some ways you can consider conservative in different ways, but that might come out against you on things. We had a huge opposition presented against us from one of the groups on campus who just railed against us to no end about free speech and saying, how can you guys say that Sex Week shouldn't happen? Like, I agree that it's distasteful, but you should let them have their thing because it's free speech. And it just really helped me realize, wow, I hadn't thought through my understanding of free speech. Yeah, I guess there are some things that I think are too barbaric or immoral and actually do not have a place in learned campus discourse, and just considering the role of a university, private institution, government, and how do those things inform the moral life and the discourse. Another challenge, I think, and anyone here who has a talent for things like website design, fundraising, contacting speakers, planning events, booking rooms, you guys are all a huge godsend and blessings for this type of effort. So if there are people here who are good at those things, making posters, etc., you gotta be there, because there's some of us who just, we can't do it. We don't have a practical bone in our bodies, and it helps a ton. I mean, this is the most important part, really, is getting the message out there, getting things done in these ways. So, just learning to see your own weaknesses and strengths. I can't make a poster to save my life. I can't raise $1, but I have friends who can, and it helps to sort of realize these things, acknowledge your weaknesses, and these are the biggest challenges, I think, is working that out with those around you and getting the work done.
Well, when I became president of True Love Revolution, I thought that the biggest challenge, or one of the things I was most afraid of, was being judged and what other people would think about, me. And I didn't want to be that girl who was the president of the chastity club. I was like, I just, that idea was scary. But it's been the best thing. I mean, that's not the challenge. The hate mail and all of that exists, but when you have a group of friends that see the world the way you do and that care about what you do, it's so easy to just not care about what some random person wrote on a blog post you'll never see. And if there's someone who says something mean to you, well, just let it go. But one of the things that I've actually found really challenging is engaging people who agree with you but don't want to impose their views on others. For me, this is the most frustrating line that I have come across in the last year or so. And it happens in different circles, the pro-life circle, a lot of our decisions do affect others. And so there are different ways to go about that. But I think that when you market your way, as an organization, we exist to promote an idea and to make people aware of this idea. And I don't think that by showcasing our idea, we are forcing people to live by these values. And so I think it's important to make that distinction. You live by these values, and I think you should be proud of them. So I'm still working on that. But if you guys have any advice for me, please talk to me afterwards.
I think I'll speak to a different kind of challenge. Not to say that those are very important. That would be the sort of two-headed same challenge of low membership and short life of your group. There's sort of fears that constantly seem to come up, and there's certainly been things that we've been worried about at Georgetown. For most of the existence of our group, it was mostly just three students, myself and two others, and we had great fears that our group would collapse as soon as we left and nothing would continue on from it, and that we'd never be able to find new members. The way that we actually, it was really not overcome by our own doing, but it did teach us a lot of lessons in retrospect. After we hosted Dawn Eden last spring, somehow the message got around to the Catholic chaplaincy of Georgetown's campus ministry. And a professor got in touch with one of us, Dr. Mastriani. He was here earlier today, but I believe he's gone home. And he mentioned to us that he taught this class on a Catholic vision of marriage, and that he had, from his class in the fall, 5 or 6 students who had been talking with him about starting a group like this. We got together, met up with him, and just merged our two groups as soon as we could. Since that time in the spring, between that time in the spring and now, we've more than tripled the size of our membership. We've secured a faculty advisor who will be there years and years after we leave, who has a strong position both as an administrator in the Catholic chaplaincy and as a professor on campus, and a regular supply of new student members through this class that he teaches. We've written a mission statement. We've been working on a constitution. Our group's come together in ways that we never expected it would. Now, other than sort of responding to emails, we never really did anything because he got in touch with us. But the lesson that I learned from this is to to consider more carefully the avenues on campus where you can get in touch with people. So, like for Dr. Mastriani, if we had just opened the course catalog and looked under Catholic studies, there would have been Catholic vision of marriage. Now, wouldn't you think if you saw a class like that, you'd get in touch with that professor and find out if he wants to work with your group? And you'd contact the students in the class and say, it sounds like you guys might be interested in the kind of things that we're doing. Would you like to join our group? And that's exactly what happened. I mean, if we had, like I said, if we had only opened the course catalog, and I'm sure you come from, I mean, like Georgetown has several thousand students and hundreds of professors. I'm sure that's similar for most of you. So I think what we've really learned from that would be to look more carefully at where you might find allies on campus, particularly in terms of professors, because if you can get an advisor who is committed to your group, not the sort of, I mean, someone who's interested in helping your group, that's great. But someone like the advisor we have, who really, really, really has been wishing for years and years and years that something like this would come around. If there happens to be something like that at your campus, there may not be, Georgetown's a different school as a Catholic school, but there happens to be something like that at your campus, do everything you can to try and find something like that. Look through those course catalogs. Find that weird class that's listed somewhere. Find maybe a new professor who's on his 4th or 5th year, just shy of tenure, and after that he'll be able to start helping you. Something like that. And reach out through different ways to find new students who might join your group. Look through those class rosters. Contact all the different campus ministries. When we host events, we go through every group on campus that we can think of that might be interested in coming. Those are, the dozens of different Protestant ministries on our campus, the, many different Catholic ministries, the Muslim Student Association, the Jewish Student Association, all the way through campus ministry. We contact different political groups on campus that might be interested in these sort of things, and just get the message out. And see if people will come, and you'll find someone, among those pools of thousands of people who might be interested in being your next president for several more years. So that's how we overcame that.
Excellent. In fact, you've done very well here because you've covered essentially all 4 questions in 3. So well done there. Let's give a hand to our panel.
I graduated from Princeton this past June. My question's for Chris Mooney. So Georgetown's Catholic, unlike like Princeton or Yale or Harvard. But I mean, like Georgetown's definitely not like Thomas Aquinas College or Franciscan University. It's not like a conservative Catholic. So I was wondering, like, has the administration helped or have they hindered you? Like, have they been on your side or have they been against you?
So has the administration of Georgetown helped or hindered?
So I'll have to say first that honestly, we've kept under the radar for too long for me to be able to really answer that question for you. This semester was our first time partnering with with Dr. Mastriani. I don't know if anyone was really paying a whole lot of, if any administrators were really paying attention to us before now, but. It is a concern of ours whether or not it might come up in the future, particularly as we work on, perhaps in the future, refining our mission statement, maybe adding in more specific, position statements in a sense. That is a concern of ours. I think the advantage at Georgetown is, it is, like you said, a very different Catholic school from, say, Christendom College or something like that. We still do have people at Georgetown who come to the school because of its Catholic identity and are interested in defending that. At the same time, it's also a bit of a mixed bag. So I think I would say we are concerned that we might run into some administrative difficulties in the future. Our safeguard right now has been that by having Dr. Mastriani as a Catholic chaplain, as our direct sort of advisor, that he has some more sway administratively than we as individual students might. We're going to try to be as careful as possible going by. But also, as I think I was trying to say earlier, our goal is really to affect students one-on-one. So if coming out with a really bold position would put us in a lot of trouble and keep us from doing that work, we might take it a little bit longer and try to see what we can do in the future instead. So,
So we've got a microphone that will be wandering, so if you'd stand up as well, that would help project, I think, in this hall. I hope that you heard his answer. To me, it's an unusual answer. So we have a student graduate of Princeton who said, you're at a Catholic institution, a big one, and then the student from the Catholic institution talking about issues of love, marriage, and family is saying, we're flying under the radar because we don't want to upset the administration of this great Catholic institution of Georgetown. I'm sure there's a longer story there, and we could unpack that, because it does seem counterintuitive to some degree. And it just shows you that each of these are individual contexts.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next question.
Hello, my name is David. I'm from Georgetown University, and all three of your schools have a huge graduate student population: business, law, medicine, places where there's a lot of conservative students, and many of whom, such as my wife and I, are both students at Georgetown, who are like the end product of what you're teaching. They're the people who have waited and then now are in a sexually faithful, happily intact family. What are you guys doing to reach out to the many conservative graduate students who would completely support your cause? I know we just know about this because my wife saw that awesome flyer. But do you guys have any part of your battle plan, if you will? Do you plan to involve the graduate students?
Sure. So we had a conservative reception this fall where it was very broadly conservative, but we sought to bring together the business school, the law school, the Kennedy School, the undergraduate population, and any other slightly conservative, or other groups that, other schools that we thought would be interested in being part of this reception. And we had about 100 people show up from all the different schools. And there we got emails, and Professor George is a visiting professor at the law school. So he hosts these like weekly seminars, and it's widely attended by graduate students. It's really hard to find graduate students where they're like all over the place and doing a bunch of different things. But I think that some places do lend themselves to finding them more easily, like a church or a synagogue, places where everybody, regardless of your age, will go. So this is a great way to reach out to older people. That helps.
Those older people,
Sorry.
graduate students.
It's an interesting situation at Yale because it's sort of a very different world, the grad student world, and I think the one with which I have the most contact would be the divinity school. Now, the only tragedy there is that a lot of the time the perspective of a lot of folks at divinity would be more to be hostile towards an effort like UBYC than to support it. There was some support, some petitions signed by div school students, some law school students, but from everything I have seen, the efforts of these sorts of things in the graduate departments are unfortunately and sadly very, very small and consist of a smaller handful of students than what the undergraduate population has. So we haven't had much interaction, sadly.
And sorry, one more thing. With technology, it's really easy to connect with people via LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. And so all these different organizations have email lists. So we always try to sign up people for our email list, or also I'll send an email to the Federalist Society at the law school and say, we're having a speaker, will you send an email over this list? So that really facilitates our communication.
Dr. Lopez.
Hi, I'm hearing a lot of discussion of conservative ideology, and I was wondering if, because I live at a campus where there's no conservative presence at all, whether any of you have thought of ways of maybe uncoupling sexual integrity from the conservative label and forging alliances with people who are liberal on other issues, like, I don't know, environmentalism, or people who maybe are suspicious of corporate policies, but who will be sympathetic to your sexual philosophy. Whether you have any means of picking apart sexual integrity from a conservative label.
One thing I always like to say when people ask me, I prefer to respond, I'm Catholic, not conservative, because I think there is a great deal of difference. I simply use the word because in a sexual context, we're talking about, more traditional forms, so we're trying to conserve, I guess, a certain vision of sexuality that has maybe fallen apart over recent decades. So in that case, I just use it as a term of convenience for this area. I know one interesting thing was dealing sort of with, we had an interview with Q magazine, which is the LGBTQ magazine at Yale, and one of the things that the girl who interviewed me mentioned was that among the gay community there is a lot of agreement with parts of UBYC's message about sort of promiscuity, and a real disappointment among that community that there wasn't more of an effort being made at sort of more committed type of stuff among gay folks, and that the sort of stereotype that you had to be sort of promiscuous, and because of that stereotype sort of forced that element into the culture rather than one that was more stable and committed was a big disappointment, according to her, among the gay community, and she saw a lot of sympathy with us in that regard of trying to foster a vision of commitment rather than the hookup.
I think that this is somewhere where we've definitely not done so well. But I think one of the reasons that they've been coupled is that we've drawn a lot of our support initially from these more broader conservative groups. But we've realized that by doing so, we've also alienated, like you said, a lot of people who don't agree on fiscal issues or other related issues. So we've tried to diversify the rest of our programming, and really in our rhetoric and what we write, we try to stay away from anything. But in programming, we try to invite different groups that are not Republican or conservative to co-sponsor. So I hope that reflects that we're not just conservatives, and there are people who are conservative that aren't really socially conservative as well. So I think that's important to keep in mind and distinguish as well.
We're in a great hall. If you look around just for a moment, the structure of this building, it comes from somewhere. This tradition, of course, is the educational tradition. It's quoting, I think, a building or two, an actual building or two. So if you were to go over, say, where Professor George was trained at Oxford, you'd see Christ Church College. And the hall, the great hall there with pictures of its students, such as William Penn, who, of course, got given to him a paid-off loan by the king, and was able to settle and set up his great experiment in Pennsylvania. He was also given bits of southern New Jersey. John Locke is on the wall there as well. And of course, that was a great model. As you know what that model was for. The great model was Harry Potter's Hogwarts, right? Little boys going up chimneys. That seems to be a problem with the British, isn't it? Sending boys up chimneys. Anyway, so this tradition, and this hall, I think, is less quoting Christ Church College. I think it's really quoting King's College, Cambridge. You've got the screen here. In the King's College at Cambridge, it's the chapel. So you've got a food hall and a chapel. In a sense, both of those are combined in this unit, and indeed, at Oxford and Cambridge, eating is a part of this fellowship, and I'm hopeful that you've felt something of that. But there's another kind of tradition, not just the architectural one. It's the tradition of learning. That's what we've attempted to provide something here for: skills, resources, equipment, tools, various ways to say this, so that you can take these and go back. You've heard people say sometimes the same statistics, showing you that they're drawing from what seems to be established social science, data, but also making arguments about why it is this conference exists. What does the Love and Fidelity Network strive to do, strive to impart? What are its aims? So that you're able to be the leaders of the next generation, because leaders are needed to articulate the tradition. A great historian, Elizabeth Fox Genovese, she's now passed on and departed. She wrote that history teaches that civilization has always been accompanied by, indeed grounded in, an ideal of marriage and family that attempts to join the biological difference of men and women in the common project of responsibility for the next generation. We learned today of the roles, and today we seem to emphasize particularly the role of fathers in establishing this next generation, some of the speeches that have been given. She says, history suggests that since the dawn of time, one of the principal tasks of civilization has been to bind men to families, to hold them accountable for the children they father and for the children's mother. Certainly, I think that's come through. There's more to this tradition as well, though. You've heard not only from Roland Warren and Patrick Fagan, but also from Jay Buchevsky about the natural law tradition. Well, that tradition is combined at the university. The university is ancient. It's one of the great gifts, particularly of how they've developed in Western civilization. This hall reflects that kind of heritage. So when Meg Whitman made the donation to Princeton University to create this hall, it was architecturally with that in mind, to connect it to this tradition. We're taught the liberal arts at the university. And one of the things that Professor George has commented on is what the liberal arts are and were meant to do. What was the design of the liberal arts? He writes, the classical understanding of the goal of liberal arts learning is not to liberate us to act on our desires, but rather and precisely to liberate us from slavery to them. Personal authenticity, under the traditional account, consists in self-mastery, in placing reason in control of desire. According to the classic liberal arts ideal, learning promises liberation, but it is not liberation from demanding moral ideals and social norms. It is rather liberation from slavery to self. Now he concedes that this is countered. There's a newer way. And you've heard people dating it to the sexual revolution in the 1960s. This way of accounting for the liberal arts is exactly the opposite of what he's described here. In fact, he goes on to say that this other conception of personal authenticity means that whatever impedes one from doing what one truly wants to do, unless that is what one happens to want to do is in violation of some norm of political correctness, is a mere hang-up. Something that holds one back from being true to oneself, from being the person one truly wants to be. Such impediments, be they religious convictions, moral ideals, or what have you, are to be transcended for the sake of the free and full development of your personality. Meaning is that you're able to act on your sexual desires that you have been repressing or been taught to repress through family, through tradition, through religion, and that this is the meaning of the liberal arts, to liberate you from those supposed hang-ups. So you see the two competing views. One of the things that Professor George's teacher at Oxford mentions, Joseph Raz, is that marriage requires the support of culture to be able to exist effectively. You heard Dr. Fagan mention this combination of things that holds that together. That's also very ancient. I mentioned in my opening remarks that it reflects, in a sense, Aristotle. And how so? The idea that virtue is developed in a community, in a polis, where there's legislation in support of the ideals of family, and also where your family instructs you, and where there are teachers. If one of those elements is not there, the other might be able to compensate. But if all are threatened, if all are being undermined, then it's much harder for culture to support marriage and family. In some ways, what you've heard is that our civilization is facing this. We talk about fiscal cliffs in the election. We're not speaking, of course, about the demographic cliff or the moral cliff and the influence and impact that this might have generally on the population. You have insights and understanding into this. It doesn't mean that you can't live joyful lives, but it does mean that you need to be thoughtful and to take responsibility for your personal moral agency. That you are choosing to live a particular way that might not have the support of the culture at large, or perhaps the educational structures that are traditionally there, or even perhaps, and we heard one of our students here allude to it, maybe not even perhaps always of family members. This can be a difficult position to be put in. But we do need to support each other. We need to find that support. In fact, it's interesting that in the novel by Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre, Jane, a Quaker woman, she mentions what helps her at a particular time of crisis. Right now in this great hall on this beautiful campus, we speak with a certain ease about things that we know when we're faced with personally might challenge us a bit more. So too was Jane Eyre challenged. Mr. Rochester, the wealthy man from the north of England, for whom she's been a tutor to his niece, I believe, essentially makes a proposition to her. He says, if we can't get married, and he of course has a particular problem there because he has a wife in the attic, he says, why don't we live together? Let's cohabit. And it's fascinating the way that Bronte describes the state of Jane Eyre's mind and response. While he spoke, when Mr. Rochester spoke, my very conscience and reason turned traitors against me and charged me with crime in resisting him. They spoke almost as loud as feeling, and that clamored wildly. Oh, comply, it said. Think of his misery, think of his danger. Look at his stare when left alone. Remember his headlong nature. Consider the recklessness following on despair. Soothe him, save him, love him. Tell him you love him and will be his. Who in the world cares for you? Or who will be injured by what you do? Maybe that's not something that you haven't heard before. You haven't put in too many ideas there. But then she says, still indomitable was the reply. I care for myself. I will keep the laws given by God, sanctioned by man. I will hold to the principles received by me when I was sane and not mad, as I am now. Laws and principles are not for the times when there is no temptation. They are for such moments as this, when body and soul rise in mutiny against their rigor. Stringent are they, inviolate they shall be. If at my individual convenience I might break them, what would be their worth? They have a worth, so I have always believed. And if I cannot believe it now, it is because I am insane, with my veins running in fire and my heart beating faster than I can count its throbs. Preconceived notions, opinions, foregone determinations are all I have at this hour to stand by. There I plant my foot. She needs to rely on her formation, what her family has given her, what her religion has given her, the things that she's learned in her life experience, because in the moment of crisis, she, even in that condition, is almost unable to resist. So here is a moment, a day and a half or so, of sanity, where you could take things in, where we've been cared for and looked after, where we've had experts speak to us, scholars share with us, students give us insights into things, experts in other fields, media, branding, ministries, faculty. This is the time to take this in, so that in moments of crisis, and you heard, of course, Roland Warren speak of that in the crisis moment, what do you decide to do? And he, of course, connected that, I think, to the broader picture of why we are here. He mentioned to that excellent question that one of you asked. He spoke about, of course, his own decision after a moment of crisis where he'd not chosen well, where he made a mistake. as we all do. And he had to make a decision. He made a choice. And he connected the choice that he and his future wife made to accept the responsibility for the life that they had created and to provide for that life, to nurture that life, to welcome that life, to love that life, to raise that life. And he pointed to his daughter, the son, son, whom we just heard referenced in the biography for him, and he said, that's that son. And that was the way he answered the question of the student who said, how did you go from fatherhood initiatives to being in a crisis organization for people facing these kinds of questions? And he connected it for us there. I think that there's another way to look at it as well, and all of us have perhaps felt this. I was speaking with Caitlin just after the refreshments over in East Pine. And she mentioned something to me, and I asked her permission. I said, would I be able to just share this little part of what you mentioned? Because I found it incredibly insightful to giving us a broader vision of why we are here and what we are doing, even beyond the learning of skills and the leadership that you'll assume at campuses. But really the root and branch, and I'm borrowing those words, a book that was written, that bind us to these ideas of sexual integrity, upholding of marriage and family. She said that she came across something, I think in a journal, if I remember correctly, of her grandfather. Her grandfather had a child, and she found these prayers written in his journal, pleading with the divine to help him be a father, because he didn't know how. He wasn't sure what to do. And so he pleaded with a higher power to give him assistance, because he knew that this was precious, this life, that it was something that required him to rise up, to be the kind of man that Dr. Fagan says that men ought to be, and that they will be if they take responsibility for families. And Caitlin reflected how, reading this, she could see herself in this chain of generations, that she, being here, is a part of that. And she also mentioned, as she charts that family from that decision that he made, she sees the impact on the generations and the chains of families and which direction that branch of the family has taken. So not just one person or that one life, but generations of families, interconnected. And that's what she glimpsed by finding this journal and seeing the humble pleadings of her grandfather when he didn't have the resources himself. He acknowledged that there was a place where he might just be able to find them. Very grateful for the Love and Fidelity Network. I know it's already influencing the students at my home institution at Brigham Young University through the things that I've been able to share, and other students who've come over the years, just as you will do. We'll go back to campus and share. I know it will influence the communities in which these students live, the families that they will have. I'm hopeful that it will do the same for you. Thank you.